writing this from a hospital waiting room with my hands wrapped like I tried to catch barbed wire on instinct. I went camping last weekend at a state park outside my town. That is what the reservation email said, Loop C. I still have the receipt. It's smeared from rain and sweat, but I can read enough of it. State park, camping fee, 1 night, vehicle fee, total $35. A reservation ID that means nothing to anyone except me. I'm not asking you to believe in the paranormal. Something mechanical happened to me out there. Something you can buy, carry in a tote, and switch on. I camp alone a lot. I do it the boring way. I tell my sister where I am. I park nose out. I lock food up. I do not hike off trail at night. I do not drink. I do not go looking for trouble. This time, I wanted one quiet night and a morning coffee that tastes like smoke. I got there around 4:40 p.m. The ranger in the booth tore my printed slip and gave me the usual talk about quiet hours and not leaving coolers unattended. The entrance sign had a changeable letterboard under it. Fire danger was moderate. No moving firewood. Quiet hours, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The park was half full. Families in big SUVs, a couple with a rooftop tent, a group of teenagers arguing over a Bluetooth speaker that kept cutting out when they walked too far from it. Loop C sat deeper in the pines. The road was dirt and washboarded. My spot was on the outer edge, not the best view, but private. Picnic table, fire ring, one of those steel beer boxes bolted into a slab of concrete, the kind that squeals when you open it. The first thing that felt off was the post. There were 4 skinny fiberglass stakes around my site, about waist height, with bright orange reflective tape on the tops, like survey markers. They were spaced in a loose square that did not match a normal campsite boundary. Each stake had a black zip tie near the top, cinched tight around nothing. I stood there longer than I want to admit, staring at them with my hands on my hips like that would solve anything. I told myself it was maintenance, hazard tree marking, utility work, something. I set up my tent, a little 2-person backpacking tent. I parked nose out. I put my cooler in the bear box. Here is the stupid human mistake I keep replaying. I did not latch the bear box the first time. I heard the heavy door thunk. I walked away thinking it was secure. 10 minutes later, I walked back and realized the latch was still open by half an inch, the way it sits when you do not pull it down and lock it. I muttered at myself, fixed it, and moved on. Around 6:10, I walked to the restroom building to wash up. The building was painted that tired park bathroom green, and it smelled like damp concrete and lemon cleaner that never quite wins. On the way back, I passed a bigger site where Dad was pounding stakes into the ground with the flat side of a hatchet. He nodded at me and said the bugs were insane. I agreed, even though I hadn't noticed bugs yet. He looked past me toward my site and squinted like he was trying to read something in the dark. "What are those poles?" he asked. "Already here," I said. "Probably maintenance." He made a face like he did not love that answer, then went back to his tent. I made a small fire, not a big one, just enough to feel like I earned being outside. I ate a pouch dinner and sat on a bench with my headlamp around my neck, listening to the campground noise thin out. A baby cried somewhere down the loop. Someone laughed too loud and got shushed. A car door slammed. Then it got quiet in that way campgrounds do when you still hear people, but it comes in little distant pieces. At 9:58, my phone flipped from 5G to SOS. I remember because I looked at it before crawling into my sleeping bag. I texted my sister, "All good, night," It failed to send. Not surprising. Lots of parks have dead spots. I fell asleep with my keys in my hand. That is another thing I normally never do. I always put them in the same pocket. This time I was half asleep and I set them on the picnic table when I tightened my tent guidelines, then forgot to pick them back up. I did not realize that until later when it mattered. I slept for maybe 2 hours. I woke up because my tent moved. Not a gentle flutter of the wind, a hard tug like someone grabbed the rainfly and yanked. My first thought was an animal brushing past. Then the tent moved again, lower, like pressure at ankle height. I sat up fast. My elbow hit the tent wall. My heart went straight to my throat. I listened. No footsteps, no snorting, just a faint sound outside that didn't belong. A tiny, clicking, steady, like a cheap plastic pen being pressed over and over. I found my headlamp and turned it on, pointing it at the tent wall. The nylon glowed. Shadows moved wrong. Thin lines crossed the fabric, not like branches, not like the normal wavering shapes you see when a light hits canvas. I pushed the door zipper open just enough to look out. The beam hit the orange tape on the nearest stake and flashed bright. Behind it, in the dark, something caught the light in sharp little glints. Clear line, finishing line, monofilament. Dozens of strands stretched between the stakes, some at shin height, some at waist height, some higher. A web that had not been there when I went to sleep. And it was moving, not swaying, pulling, tightening. The clicking got faster. A line snapped tight across the front of my tent door and the nylon creased around it like it was being cinched. The tent shifted an inch, then another. I crawled out on my hands and knees because standing felt like begging to get clotheslines. The headlamp made the lines sparkle for half a second, then they vanished again, unless the beam hit them at the right angle. A line caught my wrist. It did not wrap gently. It bit. Pain so clean it felt hot. It dug into skin like a wire saw. I yanked back on instinct and the line tightened, dragging my hand forward toward the nearest stake. My headlamp bounced. The beam flashed over the ground and I saw where the lines were anchored. Small black boxes at the base of trees, each about the size of a brick. Each had a spool and a little metal wheel like a tiny winch. The clicking was coming from those boxes. They were pulling the line in. A second line snapped up and caught two of my fingers together. My hands cramped instantly. I felt my pulse banging against plastic and pressure. I went for my pocket knife, got it open, brought it down on the line at my wrist. It did not cut right away. The line stretched. The blade skated. Then it finally nicked through. The moment it broke, the free end snapped back and whipped my knuckles. I rolled, trying to get clear. A line tightened under my armpit. Another caught my ankle, and my foot slid toward the stake like the ground had turned slick. I started yelling, loud, ugly. I screamed for help until my throat burned. No one came running. Either nobody heard or nobody wanted to charge into a campsite full of invisible line. Then I heard something new, not clicking. A soft electronic chirp like a key fob, followed by a longer tone. One of the winch boxes changed pitch and went from click to a smooth high whine for half a second. The line on my wrist tightened again, and I understood what it was doing. This wasn't just a web. It was a net that was closing around me. I crawled toward the nearest box, cutting lines as I went. Each cut line snapped back, stinging, sometimes catching my clothes. The knife handle got slick with blood. My wrist burned in a clean groove where the line had opened it. I reached the nearest box. It was strapped to the trunk with a ratchet strap. A thick battery pack sat beside it, wired in. On top was a small antenna, like a cheap handheld radio. The line ran through a metal guide and onto a spool. I drove the knife down and cut as close to the spool as I could. The motor protested. The line went slack for a breath. Then the spool reversed and yanked the slack back. The line tightened around my calf again, harder, like the system corrected itself. Something in the trees flashed to my left. A red dot, low, moving. My headlamp caught a shape behind a trunk. Someone using the trees, keeping distance. A hand raised. I saw the rectangle of a phone or a remote. The red dot moved again and settled on my torso, steady like it was aimed on purpose. My stomach turned cold, not because of the dot, because of what it meant. This was for me. I grabbed the battery cable and ripped it out of the box. The clicking stopped. The line around my leg went slack so suddenly I almost fell backward. For half a second, it was quiet except for my breathing and the soft snap of the fire dying down in the ring. Then another clicking started farther away. Another box. Back up. The lines began tightening again, slower, but still tightening. The person in the trees shifted. Leaves crushed under a careful step. I did not wait. I crawled out of the tightening net, cutting and dragging, getting snagged, freeing myself in inches. My shorts tore, my skin caught line, and I felt it burn new grooves across my thigh and forearm. My headlamp bounced, turning the trees into quick flashes. I got to my car and reached for my keys. Nothing. My pocket was empty. My brain did this blank, stupid pause, like it tried to deny reality for a second. Then it hit me. Picnic table. The clicking sped up again. The net tightens again. I could feel it starting to catch my waist. I turned my headlamp toward the picnic table and saw them glinting there like a cruel joke, right where I left them. I crawled to the table, grabbed them, and my wrist screamed when the line shifted against the cut. I got back to the car, hit unlocked, and yanked the door open. A line snapped tight across my waist as I tried to get in. It caught on my belt and pulled me back hard enough that my head clipped the door frame. I screamed and cut at it. The knife finally sliced through. The tension snapped back into the trees. I fell into the seat, slammed the door, and locked it. Lines slapped the outside of the car. I heard them ping against the metal like cables flicking a drum. In my headlight beam, I saw the stakes again, and my stomach dropped even more. They were more than 4. Extra stakes beyond the campsite boundary, closer to the road, hidden in brush. The web reached toward the road like it expected me to run. I started the car and threw it into reverse. The tires spun on dirt. The car lurched and I felt a jolt, like I hit something soft but strong. The hood dipped. The lines stretched. For a second, I thought the car would be held in place. Then the lines snapped. The sound was sharp, multiplied, whip cracks. The hood shook. Something slapped the windshield and left a wet streak. I reversed hard, then swung forward, aiming for the main road out of the loop. In my mirror, between trunks, I saw the person move. A silhouette, closer now. Reflective tape on their sleeves, orange like the stakes. They stepped toward my car and raised their hands, not waving, pointing. My headlights swept the ground, and for a second, I saw what they'd been standing near. A plastic tote half buried in the needles, lid cracked open, full of coiled clear line and more black boxes. Supplies. I hit the gas. On the way out, I laid on the horn until it sounded wrong. I wanted lights to come on. I wanted witnesses. Some did. Porch lights snapped on. A man stepped onto the road in socks, hands up like he did not know whether to stop me or ask what was wrong. I did not stop. I drove straight to the entrance booth. It was closed, dark, but there was an emergency phone box by the gate. A small sign above it said to lift the receiver for emergencies and not to use it for reservations. My hands shook so badly, I dropped the receiver once. I told the dispatcher someone had set wire traps in my campsite and there were motors pulling them tight. I kept saying wire because fishing lines sounded too stupid for what it had done. A sheriff's deputy arrived first, then a ranger in a separate vehicle. They took one look at my wrist and legs and told me to sit. They drove back to Loop C with lights on. I didn't go with them. I couldn't make myself. I sat under a buzzing light and watched moths slam into the plastic cover while my blood dripped onto the concrete. I remember thinking, very clearly, that the drip was too slow to be real, like my brain was watching it in someone else's body. When the ranger came back, his face looked different, like he'd aged 10 years on the drive. He did not tell me it was nothing. He did not tell me I imagined it. He said, "We found it. They found the stakes. They found the lines. They found multiple winch boxes still strapped to trees, still working, still pulling line even after I'd ripped one battery loose. They found the tote. They did not find the person. At the hospital, they irrigated the cuts. They picked clear fragments out of my skin with tweezers. They gave me a tetanus shot. The doctor asked if I had been attacked. I told him yes. He asked by what? I told him a system. 2 days later, I drove past that state park on my way to work just to prove to myself it existed. The sign is still there. The entrance still looks friendly. The little tourist board still advertises it like a peaceful place to unwind. Loop C is closed now. There is new signage zip-tied to the permanent post, bright yellow, temporary. It says the area is closed due to utility work and not to enter Loop C. If I ever camp again and see skinny fiberglass stakes with reflective tape that do not make sense or zip ties around nothing, I won't assume it's maintenance. I won't sleep in that site. I won't step between those posts. And if I hear clicking in the dark that doesn't sound like an animal, I'm leaving. I'm doing it before the lines start moving. Because once they start pulling, you stop being a camper. You become a problem somebody planned to solve.